I wanted to talk about my recent experience finally coming up with a color palette and sticking to it. This has honestly been a game changer for me. So what is a color palette? A color palette is a selection of colors that you use to paint with. There are famous color palettes such as the Zorn palette, which is a limited palette with only 4 colors. When I came up with my color palette, I didn't want to just choose a few colors to paint with out of the tube. I wanted to mix colors and come up with shades I really loved. So my method isn't necessarily for those who want to copy colors from life perfectly. If you want to do that, you may need a few more colors. My goal with having a set color palette is to have a stylistic approach, simplify, and create a consistent feeling among all of my paintings together. So let's talk about the benefits of having a color palette. Why should you have a color palette? Well, number one, you will stand out. A lot of artists out there have a jack of all trades mindset. They're trying different styles, compositions, colors all the time, and their art isn't really consistent. And that is totally fine. I did that for a long time, and that's a good way to figure out what you like, is to just experiment. But at a certain point, if you want to sell your work or build up an online presence, it is helpful to have more consistency and to give others an idea of exactly who you are and to have an overall style and feeling in your artwork. And that brings us to number 2. The second benefit is you will develop your own style. Using the same colors in your artwork over time will really give your artwork a cohesive feeling to it. You can build up a body of work that all look similar and scream, this is, Freddie's artwork. You'll notice when you're scrolling through Instagram and you see an artist page or a lifestyle influencer or a clothing brand, like any of them, if they're successful, they're often going to have a color palette or like an overall feeling to their page. You're going to see consistencies in their colors, shapes, text, everything. Doing that says this person knows who they are, and in turn that makes other people want to follow them and support them and trust them. Also, a benefit of having a color palette is once you have those set colors, you can easily go design your website or any social media branding, and it makes it that much easier. Okay, third benefit is reduce decision fatigue and simplify. Oh man, if this isn't the best benefit of all of them. If you're struggling to figure out who you are as an artist, having a color palette is a really good way to simplify your art practice. In my experience, trying to pick out colors and mix colors while I'm painting is pretty mentally taxing. So by coming up with 9 colors and pre-mixing them ahead of time, I never had to think about what colors I was going to use when I sat down to paint. I'm now able to just jump right into painting, and it's made painting a lot more fun and easy for me. Okay, the fourth benefit is you'll start to understand values and temperatures better. Values in painting are the light, medium, and dark tones, and they're actually a lot more important than even color sometimes. If you don't have the right mix of values and like contrast in your painting, your painting will start to look dull and flat, or too dark or too light. In my current color palette, I only have 2 dark colors. So that means anytime I'm going to paint a darker value, I only have 2 colors to choose from. So it makes it really simple. I don't have to think about the actual color. I just think about the value. I think in the past, I would always be thinking about getting the right color and trying to make it look like the color in real life, and I really didn't focus on the value as much. So at the end, sometimes my whole painting would be like mid-tones and there'd be no contrast, and it just looked off, and I really struggled with that. But now I can focus a lot more on the value since I don't have to pick out my colors. And temperature as well, like cool versus warm. In my 9 color palette, I have a few cool and a few warm, and when I look at a value that I'm gonna paint, I just ask myself, is it cool or warm? And then I pick a color from my palette. So don't have to worry about what color, I just say, is it warm or is it cool? And I'm able to just focus a lot more on the values and the temperature now that I don't have to worry about picking out the colors. Okay, so now let's talk about how I actually created my color palette. Step one is you want to just Google color palettes and see what is appealing to you. I think around 9 colors is perfect, but feel free to do more or less if you want. And start screenshotting palettes that really catch your eye. And really try to notice what are you drawn to over and over. For example, I love all colors. I love neutral colors, dark colors, pastel, everything. But I tried to notice what I really loved, not just liked. So I noticed that I really liked earthy tones and like vintage colors and pastels. I really liked olive green, lavenders. I just kept coming back to a few different colors. So my next step was to Google earth tone palettes or, pastel palettes with 9 colors, earthy color palettes with 9 colors, that kind of thing. So you could Google like bright color palettes or moody color palettes or warm color palettes if you really prefer like warm colors. And step 2. So once you've screenshotted about 10 to 15 color palettes, head over to canva.com. canva.com. You can also use another tool like Photoshop or Google Docs even, like just something where you can paste all of these palettes and compare them. If you've never used Canva, it's free, it's an incredible tool. You can make everything in there, like social media templates, website templates. You can just collage things in there. It's super helpful. Okay, and then I like to upload all my screenshots into Canva and add maybe like 3 screenshots to each box, so I can kind of just see like all my different palettes that I liked. And then from there, I just sort of start the process of elimination. If I like half of a palette on one and half of a palette on another, I will just cut the half off and I just start to eliminate anything I don't love. Or if I notice that one of them is standing out from all the other ones, then that might be the winner. If you don't really like any of them, then maybe go back to Google and keep searching until you find more that you like. You want to spend a little time on this because you're going to be sticking with this palette for a while, so you really want to like this palette. You can of course change it down the line, but I think it's good to stick with it for a while and just sort of commit to it and see where it can take you before you change up your palette later. You also want to have a mix of dark, medium, and light colors. Like I noticed I really like light colors, so I had more light colors and just 2 dark colors. You might be the opposite. You might like all dark colors and a couple lighter colors, but you do want to have at least like a dark, a mid, and a light tone, like a couple of each. And same with cool and warm. You want to have a couple cool, a couple warm at least, but if you prefer cool, then you can have a little bit more cool. I definitely prefer cool, I think. I've noticed over time I really am drawn to like blues. And then once you've eliminated everything and you have finalized the 9 colors that you really love, make sure to download the file, save it, screenshot it, and just put it everywhere, like have it up on your computer, easily accessible on your phone. You can print it out, just have it available because you really want to get familiar with these colors. Okay, step 3. This is the part where you're actually going to mix the colors. So I want you to, one by one, try to mix these 9 colors that you created with oil paint. And you're gonna write down the ratios as you go along. So this will vary person to person depending on what colors you already have at home. Like if you only have 5 basic colors, your process will be different versus if you have lots of colors and like fun shades and all that kind of thing. So whatever you have is fine. You're just going to mix them the best that you can to try to match up with your 9 colors. I think the important thing is to just write down your ratios as you go along so that you can recreate a color if you really like it. So my goal when experimenting was to create about 2 or 3 combinations for each color. So then I could go in and pick the best one. So what I mean by that is if you have like an olive green, there's many ways to make olive green. You can do like yellow and green together, or yellow, green, and red because red dulls green, or you might already have an olive green shade in your box. There's many ways to get there. So, my goal was to just play around and make like 2 or 3 swatches of combinations, and then at the end I can pick which one I like the best. So that's what I did. I just experimented. I mixed some colors together. Some were terrible and some looked really great. And the ones that I liked, I would swatch on my paper and save it for later. And when I felt like I got a winner, I would move on to the next color and try to experiment and come up with 2 or 3 combinations for that color. You may want to get your color wheel out, and it helps if you know a little bit of color theory, like the opposite color will always dull the other color. So if you have a blue that's a little too bright, if you add an orange to that blue, it will dull it, and that can be really nice sometimes. But if you have a lot of like fun shades that aren't pure colors, then sometimes it gets a little messy because they'll have like a cool or warm color in there. So if you have a cool blue and you want to tone it down with orange, you want to try to find a cool orange as well. If you have a cool blue and then you add a warm orange, it can sometimes muddy up the colors instead of making it look like dull and clean looking, if that makes sense. But don't worry too much, just whatever you see on your palette that you really like. I think your eye is good at knowing what looks best. So just trust yourself and experiment, So once you have at least 2 to 3 combinations for each color, I want you to go through your paper and circle your favorite one for each color. You may like more than one combination, but there's usually one that sticks out as like the cleanest looking, the purest, that kind of thing. And again, keeping in mind that you want to have some warm, some cool, some lighter, some darker, and feel free to add white into some of your ratios if you want a light color. So when you've picked your 9 color combinations, you now have your colors. You've done it. You can always finalize the ratios later when you actually mix a bigger batch. So that brings us to step 4, which is pre-mixing your colors and getting to painting. I decided that I wanted to buy empty oil paint tubes and actually pre-mix like a larger batch of my colors and just put it in the tube. That way when I sat down to paint, I could just squeeze some out of the tube and be ready. But if it's easier for you not to buy those and you just want to mix out a bunch each time you start painting, that's totally fine too. Either way, you're saving time by not mixing while you're painting. Just don't forget to write down ratios if you end up changing them. You just want to make sure you have that formula for the next time that you want to mix those colors. And step 5 is enjoy your hard work. The great thing about having these set colors is you don't really have to think about mixing or color combinations anymore, at least for a while. What I do is I take a lot of reference photos when I'm out in nature, and then I paint from those photos. So if I see a dark tone, I just say, okay, that's a dark value, and I have 2 dark colors in my color palette. So one of those colors is going to be that dark value. I don't have to think about it anymore. And same with the light values. If I have a bright light value, I have 2 or 3 light values I can use. So it's just simplifies the whole process. And again, this isn't necessarily about realism, because you might be saying, well, I need more colors than that. This is about having a specific style and cohesion to my art. I'm not going for like a hyper realistic, painting usually. So you can take some of these principles and apply them to whatever fits your art. Since I started doing this, I now look at my Instagram and I'm so much happier. Everything looks cohesive and goes together, and I feel like I'm really developing a style that is myself. So I hope this was helpful. I would love to hear your thoughts. I just think it's great to finally have a color palette that can scream your name and be uniquely you, and people will start to notice and appreciate your work that much more. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, I will see you really soon. Bye!